Greetings. These are the responses from New York State Education Department to the questions posed to the 2019-2024 RFP. The first two questions, the response to the first two questions is, we appreciate the commenter's input and have updated the due dates to 4/26/29 as postmarked.
Question number 3. If we choose not to apply this year, can we next year, or do we have to wait 5 years?
You would have to wait until the next RFP, which is scheduled to be released in 5 years.
Question 4. What are the institution's options for opt-out if they do submit an application? Do they have the option of rescinding their application? What negative impact would it have on the institution for future grant applications with New York State or New York State Education Department?
Institutions of higher education should apply only if they are committed to the program. However, if it becomes necessary to withdraw an application due to unforeseen circumstances, email a notice to HEOP@nyscd.gov with a justification for withdrawal. While there are no specific penalties for future grant applications, a pattern of such action could raise issues concerning responsibility of the applicant.
Question 5. When will applicants receive notification of the grant decision?
Award notifications will be sent as soon as the application review is completed. These are expected to be sent at the end of May or the beginning of June 2019.
Question 6. When will SCD notify institutions of their 2019-24 RFP was accepted and contracted? Is there a timeline?
Award notification will be sent as soon as the application review is completed. These are expected to be sent at the end of May or the beginning of June 2019.
Question 7. Confirming an earlier directive, should the proposal be mailed by regular postal mail and not use any medium that requires a signature at the time of delivery?
SED recommends tracking. Signature confirmation is not required, but the IHE can decide on shipping options like signature confirmation. Note the new postmark date of 4/26/2019.
Question 8. Will SCD send notification to each participating institution that the proposal was received and is under review?
No.
Formatting. Question 9. Are attachments allowed?
Yes. As outlined in the RFP, see question 14.2.
Question 10. Is there a reason that the font size and spacing were changed from the 14-19 RFP, i.e. 12-point font Calibri double-spaced versus 11-point font Calibri 1.5 spacing? This effectively gives projects less space to complete the same amount of content.
While we appreciate the commenter's input, no changes have been made. Using a 12-point font allows better readability of the proposal.
Question 11. If the proposal is an 11-point font, will the proposal be rejected?
No, but proposals will be converted to conform with the formatting requirements, and excess pages beyond the 32-page limit will not be read or scored.
Question 12. What are the font and spacing guidelines to follow for the proposal narrative?
Double space 8.5 inches by 11 inches pages with 1-inch margin. Use Calibri font in a 12-point size.
Question 13. The 2019-2024 RFP indicates that authorized attachments must be double-spaced 8.5 by 11-inch pages with 1-inch margins. Does the double spacing apply to the proposal narrative and budget narrative as well? If not, what spacing should be used? Single? 1.5 space?
Yes. Please use the double space pages with 1-inch margin for consistent formatting throughout your proposal. Use Calibri font in a 12-point size.
Question 14. What are authorized attachments and addenda permitted? Can you give us examples of things we can and cannot include as attachments?
Please refer to page 46 in the RFP. Please reference the following and include as attachments. 1. A section on key personnel and/or HEOP management. 2. Job/title descriptions. Do not use resumes in lieu of job title descriptions.
Question 15. Rather than using pages for attachments, may we include website addresses for certain college offices that can provide essential support for the HEOP office and its students?
No. While we appreciate the commenter's input, it is preferred not to receive website addresses but attachments as noted in the RFP.
Question 16. Will programs be penalized for including charts that are not specifically requested in the guidelines? Will programs be penalized for including appendices or attachments that are not specifically requested in the proposal guidelines?
No, but any additional items that are not specifically required will not be scored.
Question 17. In section Proposal Guidelines, what is meant on page 44 by unauthorized attachments or addenda? For instance, during the last cycle, position descriptions, program brochures, and other supporting materials were included in an appendix to include information for the recruitment process. Can you define unauthorized attachment or addenda, and would such documents be considered this?
The quoted language on page 44 of the RFP refers to items that are not specifically required in the RFP. Job title descriptions are listed as required attachment on page 46 of the RFP. Brochures are not. See question 19.
Question 18. Can all organizational charts be attached as appendices in reference to page 46, part 5B?
Yes.
Question 19. If a brochure or university formatted position description are approved attachments, according to the guidelines, attachments must be double-spaced 8.5 by 11-inch pages. These documents have their own formatting. Must they be reformatted for inclusion in the appendix?
These types of attachments will not have to be reformatted. As noted in question 17, position descriptions are required attachments. Brochures are not. Therefore, if a brochure contains information that you wish to have considered by the reviewers, that information must also be included in the narrative.
Question 20A. Are you aware that the maximum page numbers for the individual sections of the narrative, 32, is greater than the total number of pages allowable in the entire narrative, 30? B. Page 44 guidelines state that the proposal narrative should be no more than 30 pages. However, when each section's page max is calculated, it comes to 31 pages, and there is no page allotment for the extra credit. Could the max page allotment for the proposal narrative be increased to 32 pages? To be clear, guidelines state the narrative must be in either Calibri font 12 point, no more than 30 pages. However, when you add the section limits, the total page is 31, not including the extra credit section. Is the page limit 30 or the approved limit of 31 plus the extra credit?
Your proposal may have up to 32 pages for the program narrative and extra credit, not including attachments.
Funding. Question 21. If a program is considering increasing their FTE, how should this be noted in the RFP and budget? I am uncertain as to whether I should put the current numbers and base the budget on that, or should I use the desired increase numbers and create the base budget on those figures?
Use the desired increased FTE numbers and create the budget based on those figures, as long as the FTE does not exceed 650.
Question 22. On the first page of the RFP, it is stated that HEOP awards will be a maximum of $7,000 per FTE. Our current annual budget of $492,236 for 65 FTE, or approximately $7,572.86 per FTE. It appears that this would be a cut for us. and I was under the impression that we would be at level funding at a minimum. Could you please advise if we should assume level funding or if the figure per FTE will be updated?
The total amount requested must be calculated using the estimated number of FTEs multiplied by 7,000 for IHEs outside of New York City and multiplied by 7,500 for IHEs within New York City.
Question 23. Our current per FTE credit rate is in excess of the $7,000 rate listed in the RFP. Can we request at our current rate, or will we be limited to the $7,000 per FTE listed in the RFP?
An IHE outside of New York City cannot ask for more than $7,000 per FTE.
Question 24. Is it allowable to use the 18-19 grant budget $7,574 per FTE when completing the budget for the 1924 RFP?
No.
Question 25. If is approved for full funding, $7,500 times the FTE, are we able to request more funds in the future as soon as the first year of the cycle?
No. You are entering a contract with New York State for the cycle, 5 years, and the annual budget is based upon the appropriation approved by the legislature.
Question 26. How are decisions made about the money awarded per FTE? It says up to $7,000. How low could it be, and how is that decided?
An IHE can ask up to $7,000 per FTE and up to $7,500 per FTE for New York City. However, it can be lower based upon the IHE's cost calculations per student.
Question 27. Is there a minimum number of HEOP students to be served annually in the program?
Current programs have 32 or more student FTEs in HEOP. Therefore, SED recommends having a minimum of 30 FTEs annually in any program except for startup programs. These may start with less than 30 FTEs in the first year, but SED recommends at least 10 FTEs. Critical mass is needed to ensure program success.
Question 28. Is there a requirement to involve a specific number of New York State Ed programs in the HEOP program? i.e., if we currently have a C-STEP or STEP, would we have to include a specific number of these students as HEOP students?
No, there is no requirement to include a specific number of students in other opportunity programs at the IHE as HEOP students. However, double counting of students for reimbursement for the same activity from more than one program will not be permitted.
Question 29. As a startup program, if awarded, when is it expected the first cohort of HEOP students be enrolled?
The first cohort is required to attend the HEOP summer program in summer 2019 and is expected to be enrolled in classes in the fall 2019 semester.
Question 30. As a startup program, is there a year one budget, and if no students are enrolled, or is the expectation that students are enrolled beginning summer 2019?
A summer program and the year one budget are mandatory.
Question 31. Can a continuing program increase its FTE students served in the new contract cycle?
Yes, as long as the FTE does not exceed 650.
Definitions of frequently used terms. Question 32, page 5. Full need packaging. If a student loses the TAP grant, is the educational institution responsible for the cost?
Yes, the institution is responsible for fully packaging all HEOP students.
Pre-qualification requirement. Question 33. Should the notice of intent come from a specific administrator of the institution, e.g., the president's office, or may it be sent by any administrator with the authority to do so? Page 2.
The notice of intent email may be sent by any authorized representative of the applicant, IHE.
Description of program. Question 34. Is there a responsibility to provide support to off-campus residents and commuters. Page 6, on-campus meals, living stipend, etc.
Yes, all students need to be full needs packaged. Please also see the equity and non-discrimination policy on page 17 of the RFP and the supplemental financial assistance section on page 26 of the RFP.
Question 35. On page 11, it states that HEOP funds may be used for salary increases. Does this mean that we could give our HEOP staff increases using grant funds even if the rest of the institution did not receive increases?
The intent of this paragraph is to ensure that HEOP staff receives an equitable salary, including pay increases with equivalent staff titles at the institution.
Question 36, pages 8 through 9, part-time student in a full-time program. Are seniors allowed to be on the roster if they are part-time during the last semester? The description is a bit confusing. The description initially mentions students with extenuating circumstances being eligible, and if that is the case, who is the funding source? New York State Education Department or the institution?
Yes. Seniors are allowed to be on the roster if they are part-time during their last semester. The funding source does not change. The funding source may come from the HEOP grant and/or the institution. HEOP students, whether part-time or full-time, must be fully packaged.
Question 37, page 9, special sessions. New York State education funds are not available for continuing students to attend a special academic session without justification. Can an example of a justification be given, and what is the appropriate documentation?
An example may be, but is not limited to, a prerequisite course that is offered during a special academic session which the student needs to take to make academic progress in their studies. SED will inform the IHE what documentation is required.
Question 38. On page 9 under special sessions, item 1 specifies that if a director and financial aid officer verify a student's legitimate reason to attend a special session, they must document this. What constitutes a legitimate reason, and what type of documentation is required? Are there any legitimate reasons that would justify the use of HEOP funds? If so, what is the process to seek SED approval?
See question 37. The process for the approval is to email your SED liaison and provide the rationale for the request. SED will inform the IHE what documentation is required.
Question 39. What's the success rate of startup program applications versus a renewal program application for the last grant cycle?
The success rate of new applicants for the 2014-19 RFP cycle was 100%, which is higher than the programs that submitted renewal applications.
Student eligibility, question 40, page 13. Under criteria for determining educational eligibility for HEOP includes but not limited to the following. Number 8, attendance in a high-needs high school. Can we go outside of this list? If not, this does not work for universities that have higher academic criteria.
Yes, this list of criteria on page 1213 of the RFP is not all-encompassing. Furthermore, all students need not have attended high school in one of the high-need districts listed at the link number 8. The IHE must strive to reach the most educationally disadvantaged students that are able to succeed at that institution.
Number 41, page 13, high-need high school. Is it correct to interpret that all New York City high schools are considered high-needs high schools as detailed in the chart?
Yes. See the link.
Question 42, page 13, item number 2. Does this item include New York State residents attending boarding schools in programs in another state?
Yes, as long as the boarding school issued the student a diploma recognized by the state in which it is located.
Question 43. Has the policy regarding college credits earned as a part of the high school curriculum, i.e. AP, IB, SUPA, college and high school, etc., changed for the new RFP, i.e. students with 12 SUPA credits and 2 AP classes would be ineligible for HEOP?
The policy has not changed. However, the verbiage has been updated to clarify this policy. A student is ineligible for HEOP if, while in high school, he or she earned more than 15 college credits that would ordinarily be transferable to your institution.
Question 44, page 14. The new RFP states that student must not have earned 15 college credits or more in high school. The old RFP stated the same but had the clause that are not transferable to your institution. What if your institution does not accept the transfer credits?
If your institution would ordinarily accept the credits, then the student is ineligible. The institution cannot render the students eligible by opting not to accept the credits.
Question 45, page 13 through 14. Earned post-secondary credit-bearing certificate or degree and college courses while in high school. Item number 2, students must not have more than 15 college credits. Question, what happens to students who have 4 credit-bearing courses? Can an allowance be given in the form of a range of 15 to 18 credits?
The question is unclear. As stated in the answer to question 43, a student is ineligible for HEOP if, while in high school, he or she earned more than 15 college credits that would ordinarily be transferable to your institution.
Question 46. What about students who initially do not disclose credits earned at a higher education institution and is not reflected on their high school transcript?
The student is expected to be truthful in their application to the best of their knowledge and can be dismissed from HEOP if they falsify the application. See page 17 of the RFP. If the student is responsible for misreporting income and/or educational data, the student will be removed from the program roster with no liability for the institution.
Question 47. On page 14, item 2 under post-secondary credit-bearing certificate or degree in college courses while in high school states that students may not have earned more than 15 college credits with the exception of those participating in the 5 listed New York State sponsored opportunity programs. Could you please clarify if for these students they may earn more than 15 credits, so long as they have not earned a certificate or degree? Are students in New York State P-TECH allowed to have earned a certificate or degree and still be eligible for HEOP?
Students in NYS-sponsored opportunity programs listed on page 14 of the RFP may exceed the 15 credit limit so long as they have not earned a post-secondary credit-bearing certificate or degree while in high school, with one exception. NYS P-TECH participants who exceed the 15 credit limit may be considered for HEOP whether or not they earned a certificate or degree.
Question 48, page 14. Do the 15 college credits or more in high school credit limit apply to students who are a part of STEP, LPP, MBK, Smart Scholars, Early College High School, and New York State P-TECH?
No.
Question 49. Why are we not allowed to consider CUNY affiliated programs for transfer credits like College Now or the Medgar Evers College Prep School?
Students from those programs can be considered for HEOP if they have not earned more than 15 transferable college credits in high school. The only exception to the 15 credit limit are the NYSED sponsored opportunity programs listed on page 14 of the RFP.
Question number 50. I understand the need to support other New York State grant-funded programs, LPP, STEP, MBK, etc., page 14. However, are we unfairly overlooking high school students who have shown the same level of motivation and persistence through participation in TRIO programs like Upward Bound by saying the college credits that were earned as a part of the Upward Bound will make them ineligible for HEOP, whereas students who fit the same student profile but happen to be enrolled in LPP would not be disqualified based on earned college credits?
We appreciate the commenter's input. However, under the current RFP, students who participate in TRIO programs like Upward Bound are not exempt from the 15 credit limit.
Question 51. Transfer students, are we allowed to consider students from the CUNY ASAP program or Gutman Community College eligible for HEOP consideration? Those students share many of the eligibility markers of HEOP students.
Only students transferring from opportunity programs funded under Section 6451 or 6452, HEOP, EOP, 6CD of the New York State Education Law are eligible to transfer into HEOP.
Question 52, page 16. Under the section Economic Disadvantage, the Acceptable Documentation section 8B states Social Security Supplemental Income. Is that considered SSI benefits?
Yes.
Question 53. Is it permissible to offer a prospective first-time student a place on a wait list? And if a spot in the HEOP incoming cohort opens before the beginning of the summer program, she or he may be offered admission, and if not, is denied admission? This is standard admissions practice. I see no mention of wait lists except in the context of transfers being admitted to the institution and being placed on a wait list for a program spot, which of course is not allowed.
Yes, but only for the initial admission for first-time HEOP students in the first year. This does not apply to transfer students.
Scholarships for academic excellence. Oh, question 54. Page 17, HEOP funds may not be used to support programs that are segregated on any basis, including admissions policy, housing arrangements, classroom facilities, and allocation of financial aid. Does this statement mean that we should not be advising students to live in low-cost housing?
The HEOP students must be treated the same as the general admit students. IHE shall not discriminate against HEOP students.
Scholarships for academic excellence. Question 55. Is the New York State Scholarships for Academic Excellence the same thing as Regents Scholarships for Academic Excellence, listed on page 12 under D, eligibility? If yes, does New York State inform a student that if they accept the New York State Scholarship for Academic Excellence, they are not eligible for HEOP?
Answer to questions 55 through 58. Yes, the NYS Scholarship for Academic Excellence are the same thing as the Regents Scholarship for Academic Excellence. See the scholarship. Pursuant to 8 CRR-NY 27-1.1a, recipients of the scholarship are not eligible for admission into HEOP. However, if the IHE made the eligibility determination and admitted the student to HEOP before the student received the scholarship, the student may remain in that IHE's HEOP program. The IHE must keep documentation on file to prove the student's non-admissibility by the college's normal admission standards in the degree program for which application is made.
Question 56. Since recipients of Regents Scholarships for Academic Excellence are notified of receiving the scholarship well after they are admitted to our institution, typically over the summer, how are we expected to deny their initial eligibility for HEOP? It's my understanding that the process for nominating students for the scholarships is driven first by their high school counselors, followed by an application submitted by the student, and then fairly late notification to respective financial aid offices. These students are indeed the most disadvantaged students admitted to the university based on our selective admissions criteria. Again, how are we to know which students ultimately receive the scholarship?
See response to question 55.
Question 57, page 30. Recipients of Regents Scholarships for Academic Excellence are not eligible. Since this information may not be available during the admission cycle, please provide some guidance on expectations from the institution in implementing this requirement.
See response to question 55.
Question 58, in the 2017-18 program year, the Commission promulgated changes to the rules and regulations 27-1 and 152-1 that were approved by the Board of Regents to reflect the changes in the law. However, per the New York State Rules and Regulations 27-1, 8 CRR-New York 17-1.1, for student eligibility, it states recipients of Regents Scholarships for Academic Excellence are not eligible. Question, the RFP does not mention anything about the recipients of Regents Scholarships for Academic Excellence found in New York State Rules and Regulations 27-1. What recourse does the institution have in the event that it learns that a student is the recipient of a Regents Scholarship for Academic Excellence after the student has been admitted to the institution as an HEOP eligible student? Generally, information about Regents Scholarships for Academic Excellence is not made known to the institution until during or after the summer program.
The response to question 55.
Institutional obligation. Question 59. What are summer program requirements for room and board?
As stated on page 19 of the RFP, first-time HEOP students attending the HEOP summer program cannot be charged for their attendance. This means that all costs of participating in the summer program must be covered by the IHE. Accordingly, if the IHE is a residential campus, it must provide room and board to all HEOP first-year students for its summer program. If the IHE is a commuter school, it must provide rooms and meals for non-local HEOP students so they can participate at no cost.
Question 60, page 30. Moreover, expected to give priority for admission into HEOP to the most educationally disadvantaged students, page 4. Educationally disadvantaged students is defined. For an institution which uses a holistic approach using multiple factors, please provide some guidance or examples related to seeking the characteristic of quote-unquote most.
The IHE must strive to reach the most educationally disadvantaged students who are able to succeed at that institution. The determination of which students are most educationally disadvantaged, i.e. most lacking in the academic proficiencies required to complete college-level work, RFP, pages 4 to 5, based on a complete evaluation of each applicant's educational profile using the institution's established criteria, is a joint decision that is up to the HEOP director and the admissions officer. See Educational Advantage, RFP, pages 12-13.
Question 61. Admission policies are expected to be flexible and expected to give priority to the most educationally disadvantaged students. Please provide some clarification and examples in helping an institution be in compliance with seeking the most, quote-unquote, and retaining the expected flexibility.
See question 60.
62. If a student was previously enrolled at a non-HEOP institution or an open admissions institution and did not complete any coursework, are they disqualified from HEOP?
No. A student who completed 15 or fewer credits at a non-HEOP institution or an open admission institution can be considered for HEOP. A student with 15 or fewer credits is not to be considered a transfer student but a new applicant. As per RFP, the acceptance of these students in HEOP is not automatic. They may be accepted if they meet all HEOP eligibility requirements and at the discretion of the IHE.
Question 63. New York State Education Department defines a matriculated student as an individual who is enrolled at a college, university as a student working towards a degree. This student is usually enrolled in 12 or more credits per semester. Part-time students cannot enroll for more than 11 credits in any given semester. Can another sentence be added to the definition to include part-time students?
To clarify, a part-time student is in an approved part-time HEOP school is considered matriculated even if they are enrolled in less than 12 semester hours or the equivalent per term.
Question 64. NYSED defines a commuter student as, quote, an HEOP student who is living at home with parents or guardians, close quote. This definition does not describe a part-time student. What is a working definition for a part-time student?
Under this RFP, a part-time student is a student who is enrolled for less than a full-time student, full-time course load. As stated on page 9 of the RFP, HEOP students attending part-time in a full-time program must enroll for at least 6 semester hours or the equivalent per term, except for graduating HEOP students in their last term where they can enroll for fewer hours.
Question 65. Part-time HEOP students and summer/special sessions, page 9. In the current grant cycle, our part-time students have been allowed to register for only 3 credits during summer for the following reasons. A, the intensive nature of the classes, 3 credits of coursework in 6 weeks. B, summer semester runs across grant years and grant reporting with Summer 1 session ending in June 30 and Summer 2 session starting after July 1. Requiring HEOP students to take 6 credits also requires them to take multiple courses concurrently, all Session 1 or all Session 2, rather than consecutively, 1 course Session 1, 1 course Session 2. 3 credit summer course loads increase part-time students' level of success and shorten the number of years it takes to complete a degree. Can we request to continue to allow students to take 3 credit course loads during the summer?
Yes. As per 2019-24 RFP at page 910, part-time students in a part-time program can be enrolled in special sessions for 3 or more credits only in certain extended circumstances, such as students with disabilities, medical problems, or family responsibilities. This can happen for up to 2 semesters during their HEOP tenure as part-time students in a part-time program.
Question 66, summer program. Our college admits students fall, spring, and summer, and we provide first semester HEOP remedial and compensatory courses across all semesters. Limiting students to only admitting for summer program would put our students at a disadvantage compared to our general admission students. May we continue to admit the HEOP across all semesters?
This is not possible. All first-year HEOP students must attend the summer program prior to matriculation and enrollment. You could, however, accept eligible transfer students.
Question 67. The HEOP RFP runs until 2024. If a student joins the college and the HEOP program in fall of 2023, they would have 3 or 4 years to graduate after this grant ends. Will the college continue to receive funding for those students?
Yes, the IHE can be funded if it applies for and is successful in the next cycle in 2024, or per the phase-out method described on page 30 of the RFP. Funding for the next round will be prioritized to support currently enrolled HEOP students in projects that phase out.
Question 68. On page 47 of the RFP, it states recruitment from the local community is encouraged. On page 66 of the rubric, it states recruitment from the local community is preferred. The language is inconsistent. Encouraged and preferred can suggest different meanings. Encouraged can denote that it's great if it happens, whereas preferred can denote that grant proposals who present stronger recruitment plans from the local community will be graded higher. Please confirm the intent behind this language. Should we be following the language for the proposal guidelines or the proposal evaluation rubric?
In order to receive full points for this section, applicants need to include their local community in their recruitment plans. However, they will not be penalized if they also recruit students from across the state.
Question 69. Could you please clarify the full-time FTE calculation on page 8, i.e. total credits for the program year for all students for all semesters, including the special sessions in the program divided by 24? Does this calculation use attempted credits or completed credits?
This calculation must use attempted credits because students would be using semester or credits of HEOP eligibility.
Question 70. When the question is asked in the admissions section, page 48-1A, how many students the institution is looking to support each year of the HEOP cycle, are you asking us to restate our requested FTE, i.e., we are looking to support 73 students each year of the cycle? Or are you asking how many students are we looking to admit in each year of the cycle, i.e., we're looking to support 18 to 19 new students in each year of the program?
For ongoing programs, FTE is the total number of contracted students per year. The startup IHEs must complete the startup program only sheet on the composite budget showing how they plan to ramp up the enrollment. Note that startup programs should achieve their final FTEs by year 4. Please see page 44 of the RFP.
Question 71, documentation policy passage on page 17, certification forms with signatures of the Chief Administrator, the Chief Financial Aid Officer, and the HEOP Director will attest to the educational disadvantage and economic eligibility of each program student. These forms must be submitted as part of the HEOP reports as described in the report section. Questions. I work at a large institution. The Associate Director of Undergraduate Admissions signs the verification of educational eligibility form, not the Chief Administrator. Can the associate director of the undergraduate admissions sign the form if I submit a designee letter from the provost identifying the designee?
The associate director of undergraduate admissions could only sign the form if the chief administrator signs a designee letter identifying this designee.
Full need packaging. Question 72. Is it required to provide room and board for resident HEOP students? If so, is an institution required to provide and fund meals for commuter HEOP students?
Yes, based on each student's financial needs. The IHE is required to meet HEOP students' full financial need to cover the cost of attendance, including realistic subsistence costs. This includes room and board for resident students as needed and meals for commuter students as needed.
Question 73, Section E, asking for clarity. The section states that first-time HEOP students attending the HEOP summer program cannot be charged for their attendance. If programs offer courses for credit, is it permissible to charge tuition for those courses, but the grant or institutional funds or other funds need to be used to cover the costs?
Yes.
Question 74. Are loans borrowed to cover residential housing costs a part of the cumulative loan burden rule?
Yes.
Question 75. We have campuses in Westchester County as well as in New York City. So is the price per student different for the students who attend the Westchester County campus versus the students who attend the New York City campus?
The students should be assigned to the campus where they take the preponderance of their coursework, and the budget must be weighted accordingly. For example, if the proposed program is for 50 FTEs in New York City and 50 FTEs outside New York City, the maximum allowable budget would be $7,500 multiplied by 50 plus $7,000 multiplied by 50 equals $725,000.
Question 76. Definitions of frequently used terms, full need packaging, passage on page 5. Total resources, including all grants, expected family and institutions contributions, work study, and loans to fully meet the needs of a student attending an HEOP institution, including room and board as needed, must be maintained for the duration of the HEOP eligibility, even if the student loses TAP or its successor for any reason. Question, in the situation of a TAP loss, whether the student has failed to meet standard academic progress standards or has exhausted eligibility, is the institution allowed to include among the resources any loan funding equal to the TAP loss, even if in the event that the student exceeds his annual or aggregate loan limit at that time or later in the degree program due to this circumstance? We see this as a justifiable reason equivalent to allowing a student to exceed his loan limit to cover an EFC increase referenced on page 20 of the RFP.
No. The IHEs are responsible for academic advising and full need packaging despite the loss of TEP and or Pell grants.
Question 77. Full need packaging, maximum allowable loans, passage on page 21. The maximum cumulative loan for a resident HEOP student to complete the baccalaureate program is $25,000, and the maximum cumulative loan for a commuter HEOP student to complete a baccalaureate program is $20,000 for all students who start in the 2019-2024 RFP cycle. 2, it is strongly recommended that first-time HEOP students not be packaged with loans. However, if a first-time HEOP student is packaged with loans, the student may not be packaged with more than $5,000 per year for residential students and $4,000 per year for commuter students. Questions. Are students held to annual loan limits or the total loan limits for the student's undergraduate career? If there is an annual loan limit, is there an annual loan limit for all students beginning with the 2019-2024 RFP cycle, or does the annual loan limit apply only if the students are packaged with loans as a first-time HEOP student?
The IHEs are held to the annual loan limits for the first-time HEOP students with no more than $5,000 per year for residential students and $4,000 per year for commuter students, and to the total loan limit for students undergraduate career as follows. Outside New York City, the maximum cumulative loan limit for a resident HEOP student to complete a baccalaureate program is $25,000, and the maximum cumulative loan for a commuter HEOP student to complete a baccalaureate program is $20,000 for all students who start in the 2019-2024 cycle. In New York City, the maximum cumulative loan limit for a resident HEOP student to complete a baccalaureate program is $30,000, and the maximum cumulative loan for a commuter HEOP student to complete a baccalaureate degree is $20,000 for students who start in the 2019-2024 RFP cycle.
Prorating loans and exceptions. Question 78, page 20. Maximum allowable loans for HEOP. Are there any loan limits for students in other New York State Opportunity Programs, for example, EOP?
No.
Question 79, page 20. In the rare case of unusual and extraordinary circumstances where it is necessary for students to take out loans above the mandatory loan limits, IHEs must submit a written request to SCD with documentation justifying packaging additional loans. This justification must be submitted and approved by SCD before packaging a student with loans that exceed the loan limit. IHEs must not allow students to take out additional loans without prior approval. Is the approval needed every time a student with an elevated EFC has to take an additional loan, or when they are near the threshold of cumulative loan limit? If approval is needed every time the student takes out the additional loan, it would be difficult for a school with the 575 FTE.
No, SED does not need to approve loans taken to cover the EFC, and these loans do not count against loan limits. Any loan amounts over EFC count against the loan limits. Schools must keep documentation on file.
Question 80. Prorating loans and exceptions, passage on page 20. Exceptions can be made for students who need to take loans to cover no more than the expected family contribution, or EFC. In the rare case of unusual and extraordinary circumstances where it is necessary for students to take out loans above the mandatory limit, IHEs must submit a written request to SCD with documentation justifying packaging additional loans. This justification must be submitted and approved by SCD before packaging a student with loans that exceed the loan limits. IHEs must not allow students to take out additional loans without prior approval. Question. When an exception is being made for a student to borrow loans to cover the EFC, does this require approval from SCD, or is approval only required when this action would cause the loan limit to exceed the total maximum limit? Is approval required if it exceeds the annual limit?
No, SED does not need to approve loans taken to cover the EFC, and these loans do not count against loan limits. Any loan amounts over EFC count against loan limits. School must keep documentation on file.
Question 81, prorating loans and exceptions, passages on page 20. For students who are transferring from other New York State Opportunity Programs, SEEK, CD, or EOP, the IHE should assess the amount of loans the student has taken while in other opportunity programs and package the student with no more than $5,000 for residential students and $4,000 for commuter students for each year the student is enrolled. Question. The annual loan limit for all transfer students limited to $5,000 a year residential and $4,000 a year commuter, even if the assessment of the prior loan history indicates that the student will not exceed the maximum loan limit at the time of graduation?
Yes.
Question 82A. In the case where transfer students have accrued previous loans that could put them over the loan limit of $25,000 or $20,000, for example, students coming from EOP, can IHEs still package these students at the annual rate of $5,000 a year for residential and $4,000 a year for commuter?
Yes.
82B. If so, does this need to be pre-approved by New York State Education Department?
No.
Question, 82C. When reporting loan totals for transfer students, do we exclude loans accrued while the student was in an EOP program?
Yes. Previous loans do not count towards the loan limit.
Question 83, page 20, prorating, states that the maximum grant for transfer students is $5,000 per year. However, some institutions that use staggered loan calculations, for example, freshmen $2,000, sophomores $3,000, juniors $4,000, etc., need to budget fourth and fifth year students with loans that are higher than $5,000 per year, while still staying within the loan limits. Can this be reworded to reflect stability as long as the loan limits are adhered to?
No, IHEs must prorate for transfer students.
Question 84. Transfer students who come from community colleges often have no loans prior to transfer due to low cost of community college tuition. TAP, Pell covers all or most. A transfer student needs to have more than $5,000 per year in loans. Why is this limited? These students will not come close to reaching the loan limit.
The annual loan limit is to protect HEOP's economically disadvantaged student population from excessively burdensome loan repayment obligations consistent with the purpose of the HEOP.
Expenditures, question 85. Can you explain items which previously have been assumed by the institution further as a non-allowable cost? For example, as a starter program, is it not permissible to propose placing a part of an existing counselor's salary on the HEOP budget if that counselor will dedicate time to HEOP students if awarded? That counselor will have new tasks to the IHE counseling HEOP students. Therefore, in this narrow case, starter programs only, would it be allowable?
HEOP funds may not be used to supplant services or activities that are currently paid for out of other funding sources. The purpose of this requirement is to ensure that HEOP funds are used to benefit the intended population rather than to fund the basic educational program that the IHE would have provided in the absence of the grant. Consistent with this purpose, a startup program can reassign staff to work with HEOP students and may charge salaries to the HEOP funds up to the amount of time dedicated to HEOP services.
Budgets, or FS10. Question 86. Please explain what we should be following for the budget narrative as it does not align with the rubric. For example, pages 54 through 55 do not align with the rubric presented on page 79.
The narrative outlines the specific guidelines used for programmatic purposes, while the rubric details the scoring process. The budget should include the specific elements described starting on page 54 and on page 78, and will be scored based on the general qualities in the rubric on page 79.
Question 87, Academic Support Services, page 24, code to be used to pay peer tutors that are not HEOP students. Please clarify which code in the budget, FS10, is to be used to pay for this expenditure. Are they considered educational assistants?
Please use code 15 for any peer tutors or other tutors who are not HEOP work-study students, not the same as federal work-study. Use code 16 for HEOP work-study students.
Question 88. Does the budget that we are approved for cover summer program costs, or is there a separate RFP process for summer program expenses similar to EOP's process?
There is no separate RFP process for the summer program. All required program elements, including the summer program, need to be included in the FS10 and in the composite budget.
Question 89. In the previous RFP, we completed the composite budget in the HEOP B-1 form. Is there a specific format in which we should submit this information this time around? If so, where can it be found?
In the composite budget form, find in the link.
Question 90. If all state funds go to tuition, fees, and books, do we need to include institution funds for staff and salary? Do we need to show any institution funds?
Yes, all elements of the program, whether funded out of the state grant or with institution funds, need to be included in the composite budget form in the link.
Question 91. Is the budget that we are approved for supposed to cover all expenses such as tuition, supportive services, salaries, etc.?
The budget, FS10, only shows how you will spend the state funds. The composite budget form shows how you will spend all funds needed for HEOP, including institutional and other funds.
Question 92. How should 5 years of expenses be reflected in the composite budget? For example, for a 1.0 FTE HEOP director salary, who will serve for 5 years, one line item at 5 FTE?
The composite budget form only asks for first-year expenses.
Question 93, is it allowable to use the 18-19 grant budget's $7,574 per FTE when completing the budget for the 1924 RFP?
No.
Question 94, is it okay on the budget portion of the RFP to simply use a percent for benefits rather than specifying each category?
No, you must use whole dollar figures. You may use percentages to calculate the dollar figures to be included in the budget, and then make sure that the dollar figures add up to the correct total. Ensure that the fringe rate does not exceed the IHE's allowable maximum. Details on the breakdown of the fringe rate categories can be included in the FS10 description and/or in the budget narrative.
Question 95, please clarify page 25, remedial, developmental, compensatory, and summer courses, sections 3 and 4. The and/or clauses make it confusing. If credit is earned for the courses, does this still apply?
The point of these provisions is that the composite HEOP budget, taking into account both state funds and institutional funds, may not include both the salary of the instructor and tuition for the same course.
Question 96. On page 25 in the section covering remedial, developmental, compensatory, and summer courses, could you please explain points 3 and 4 further? In particular, it seems that point 3 is a mistake and point 4 is the intended statement.
Both statements are correct. The point is that it would be double counting to charge both the salary of the instructor and tuition for the same course against the HEOP budget.
Question 97. How is outside aid, not federal/state, calculated/affected for a HEOP aid receiving student?
IHE must make sure that the student is packaged to full needs. The inclusion of outside funds is at the IHE's discretion.
Question 98, what are the expectations about separate services other than the director, summer program, etc., tutoring, career counseling, mental health counseling, etc.?
HEOP students need to be served in such a manner so that they will be academically successful in school.
Question 99, how is the financial aid portion calculated and awarded?
Using a federally recognized needs analysis system, i.e. FASA or its successor and/or other federally recognized institutional methodology.
Question 100, what is the institutional contribution to aid for HEOP students?
The IHE makes that determination as long as the student is packaged to full needs, including outside funds.
Question 101, when entering data in the summary page, there is a column for federal and state grants, TAP and Pell, that can be used to offset tuition, but there is no column for other, which would include loans, scholarships, Access VR, EFC, which institutions may use to offset the cost of room, board, as well as tuition. Can this column please be added, or could the grants heading be changed to include other?
It can be found under Other Sources in the Composite Budget form on the Summary tab at the link below, and there is an image demonstrating that as well.
HEOP Office Organization and Administration. Question 102. Description of program. HEOP Office Organization and Administration, passage on page 11. Quote, the HEOP director must report to a senior level administrator of the institution. A senior level administrator is one who directly reports to either the institution's president, chief academic officer, and/or governing board. The institutions are strongly encouraged to have the HEOP director report to a chief academic officer, e.g. provost or vice president of academic affairs, close quote. Could you clarify if the HEOP director must report to a senior level administrator, VP or higher, or if they are strongly encouraged to report to the chief academic officer, VP or better?
HEOP director must report to someone who directly reports to either the institution's president, chief academic officer, and/or governing board at the time of the application. That said, it is strongly encouraged to have the HEOP director report directly to a chief academic officer.
Question 103. Will the program be penalized if the HEOP director does not report directly to a VP or have a direct connection to academic affairs, provost, but a clear rationale for the reporting structure/division is made?
HEOP director must report directly to a senior level administrator. As per the RFP, a senior level administrator is one who directly reports to the institution president, chief academic officer, and/or governing board. If this requirement is not met, full points will not be awarded in the organizational background section of the rubric.
Question 104. In reference to the requirement that the HEOP director report to a senior administrator, would a dual reporting line to both academic and student affairs be approvable? More specifically, the HEOP director will report directly to the AVP of Student Success, who does not report directly to a senior level administrator, with a dual reporting line to the Executive Director of Academic Policies, Operations, and Services, who does report directly to the President. Would this reporting structure be approved per RFP guidelines?
Yes.
Question 105. I work at a large institution and report to an Assistant Vice President. This was allowed in the previous RFP. For this RFP, is it required or strongly encouraged? Will my application lose points if I report to an AVP? If it is required, does my reporting to Provost VP need to be established at the time of the application, or can it be later?
It is required for the HEOP director to report to a senior level administrator and to submit a signed acknowledgement form affirming that this requirement is met. Your example would only meet the requirement that if that AVP is AVP of Academic Affairs and meets the definition a senior level administrator is one who directly reports to either the institution's president, chief academic officer, and or governing board. If this is not the case, the IHE will be expected to restructure the reporting to meet this provision by the contract start date. If in the application the reporting structure is unclear or discrepancy exists, points will be deducted. If an applicant is successful and awarded a contract, discrepancy must be addressed as directed by SED with a reasonable time after the preliminary award notice is made and before a contract can be issued.
Question 106, page 11, Director Reporting Supervisor question. Would an Associate Dean of Academic Support Services qualify as long as the program is under Academic Affairs?
Only if they report directly to a senior level administrator and meet the definition of a senior level administrator is one who directly reports to either the institution president, chief academic officer, and or governing board. Question
107. Page 11, the HEOP director must report to a senior level administrator of the institution. A senior level administrator who directly reports to either the institution's president, chief academic officer, or a governing board. Can your proposal be denied if this reporting structure is not put in place?
Your proposal must include a signed acknowledgement form affirming that this requirement is met. If, based on the totality of the proposal, the reviewers determine that the reporting requirement is unclear or discrepancies exist, you will not be disqualified solely on this basis. However, your proposal will be penalized by deduction of points for this section. Moreover, if the applicant is successful and awarded the contract, the IHE will be expected to restructure the reporting to meet this provision as directed by SED with a reasonable time after the preliminary award notice is made and before a contract can be issued.
Monitoring. Question 108, page 30. Probation for HEOP institutions, the criteria for graduation rates. Which rates, 4-year or 6-year for the 4-year degree?
SED will monitor the 4-year and 5-year graduation rate. As per RFP, an HEOP student is allowed 10 semester or equivalent of opportunity program eligibility.
Question 109, page 30. Probation for HEOP institutions, the criteria for retention and or graduation rates would be applied starting with which cohort?
SED will monitor the 2019-20 cohort for retention rate for all programs and 4-year and 5-year graduation rates for previous cohorts for current IHEs. Startup programs graduation rates will be evaluated starting in 2023.
Question 110, page 30. Probation for HEOP institutions, the criteria related to retention and or graduation rates. Is a similar criterion expected or currently in effect for the other opportunity programs of the state, e.g. EOP or SEEK?
Accountability criteria for each of the state's opportunity programs are based on the program-specific goals and statutory requirements. NYSED collects data on student progress and attainment, such as retention and or graduation rates, and uses the data to monitor whether programs are meeting expectations. We cannot answer these questions in detail for EOP, which is managed directly by SUNY, or SEEK CD, which is managed directly by CUNY.
Question 111. Please clarify the sections on reporting and probation, pages 28 and 30, which state that the HEOP students must meet at least 90% of the overall retention and graduation rates at the IHE, and that an IHE will be put on probation for retention and or graduation rates for HEOP students less than 90% of the IHE's overall students' rates for 2 consecutive years. Can an example be given for clarity?
For example, if the IHE retention rate is 90% overall for freshmen, then HEOP must have at least 81% retention rate. 0.9 multiplied by 0.9 equals 0.81. If the HEOP student retention rate is less than 90% of the retention rate of the IHE for 2 years in a row, then the IHE would be placed on probation.
Question 112, page 30. Probation for HEOP institutions, retention and/or graduation rates less than 90% of the institution. Was there an empirical or research methodology to derive this 90% standard for comparison?
SED has a fiduciary duty to make sure that the IHEs are accountable for the spending of New York State funds. HEOP strives for comparable outcomes between HEOP students and overall student outcomes at the IHE. Since HEOP students start their academic career disadvantaged, SED estimated that reaching at least 90% of the IHE's overall outcomes is a fair and equitable goal.
Question 113, on page 28 of the RFP, it states the following regarding program performance. Satisfactory performance of the grantee is in previous academic years, including but not limited to meeting 95% of the contracted number of FTEs and having the HEOP students meet at least 90% of the overall retention and graduation rates at the IHE. Is it possible this proposed 90% threshold when compared to retention and graduation rates at our institution might prove unrealistic when it comes to our student population? There are 2 primary concerns for this. 1, the size of our programs compared to the general student population at our institution is disproportionate. If a small program, 35 FTE, were to lose 8 students during the course of a year and the general graduation rate for their college was 87%, it could place them in a violation of this metric. 2, general admission students often have more parachutes than our HEOP student population, which can experience myriad emotional, financial, and family challenges that could inhibit their ability to persist. Could there be further criteria for the standard? For example, only count students toward this threshold who did not persist due to academic difficulties rather than emotional, financial, family, or health reasons? It seems unreasonable to punish programs for things we cannot control, whereas academic success is something we are actively charged with working on with students.
Student retention is a critical measure of program effectiveness. Therefore, there are no criteria that would exempt students from being counted. All HEOP students must be counted in this calculation. As stated on page 13 of the RFP, the IHE's admission process must be designed to assess the likelihood that a student can persist and succeed. Consistent with the purpose of the HEOP, the IHE must work with the students to help them overcome not only academic stresses, but also financial stresses, such as losing TAP eligibility. As per page 30 in the RFP, a one-year variance would not result in the IHE being put on probation. Retention and/or graduation rates for HEOP students would have to be less than 90% of the IHE's overall student rates for 2 consecutive years.
Question 114. Can you please clarify the explanation presented on page 8 of the RFP regarding calculating FTE by aggregating total credit hours for semester students and dividing by 24? We understand the baseline expectation is that full-time students at semester schools should take at minimum 12 credit hours per semester and thus 24 for the year. But if one student exceeds that amount for the year, say 30 hours, and another student falls below it, say 18 hours, that would appear as 2 FTE, but it is not reflecting that one student was actually full-time while the other was part-time. And it seems the priority of SED is to maintain our students as full-time. What is the logic behind calculating FTE this way?
This allows for the fact that most HEOP students would face difficulties if they were required to take 15 credit hours per semester. 120 hours to graduate divided by 10 semesters allowed for HEOP equals 12 hours per semester. This is the same methodology as in the current cycle.
Question 115. Can you please define retention? Typically, colleges define retention as persistent rate from first year to second year. Can you define SED's interpretation of retention, as it's not listed in the definition glossary in the RFP?
As per US DOE at HTTPS column fafsa.ed.gov/help/FOTW91n.htm. Retention rate is the percentage of a school's first-year undergraduate students who will continue at that school the next year. For example, a student who studies full-time in the fall semester and keeps on studying in the program in the next fall semester is counted at this rate. This will be calculated the same for sophomores continuing to junior year and for juniors continuing to senior year.
Question 116. Page 31, item number 3, phase out due to unsuccessful reapplication. It says institutions that are unsuccessful in their reapplication in the next round of the 2024-2029 funding cycle will be phased out from HEOP. Should this read next round of 2019-2024?
Institutions that are awarded funding for 2019-24 under this RFP and which are unsuccessful in their reapplication for the 2024-2029 cycle will be phased out at that point, consistent with the terms of this RFP. Any currently funded institution that is unsuccessful in its reapplication under this RFP will be phased out in a similar manner.
Requirements, pre-qualification for individual applications. Question 117. If an institution has a New York State grants document vault that is up to date with all forms, is it still necessary to go through the pre-qualification process in the grants gateway?
Your institution's status must be pre-qualified on the grants gateway at the time of the application.
Minority and Women-Owned Business Enterprise, MWBE participation goals. Number 118. Would you please provide examples of how IHEs have used the services of MWBE in their HEOP programs?
MWBE is not required in the current HEOP RFP. However, NISED strongly encourages applicants to seek NYS-certified MWBE subcontractors or suppliers to the extent possible for expenditure items in their budget submissions.
Vendor responsibilities, question 119. More clarity on how to determine if a school is a vendor. What are the criteria needed to make that determination? Current description, very convoluted.
For this RFP, all applicants are vendors. Anyone receiving a contract with NYS is considered a vendor.
Question 120. Where can we find our New York State vendor ID?
Any school that has a contract with New York State has a vendor ID. You may be able to find your vendor ID on the following systems: Grant Management, SEDREF, Statewide Financial System, or OSC VendRef.
Application forms, question 121. Acknowledgement form, page 43, Chief Executive Officer, President. Question, can an institute designee sign the acknowledgement form if a designee letter is provided?
Yes.
Question 122, financial aid award letters, page 19, section E, full need packaging, item number 2. Can award letters be kept in electronic format, or is it mandated to only have printed copies in the files in the HEOP office?
Electronic files for FA awards letters are acceptable.
Question 123, page 41. Please clarify what is meant by total number of students served over the cycle.
For current programs, multiply the number of FTE per year by 5 years, equal total number of students served over the cycle. For new programs, complete the Startup Programs Only worksheet in the composite budget form found at the link to determine the subtotal number of students served for the first 4 years, ramping up. Year 5 FTE is the same as Year 4 FTE. Add Year 5 FTE to the subtotal form from the previous calculation to get the total number of students served over the cycle.
Question 124, page 48, population, item A. State how many students the institution is looking to support each year of the HEOP cycle. Question, please clarify, does this mean new entering students for years 1 through 5, or does this include returning students' total enrollment for the 5-year cycle?
This means total FTE served in each of the 5 years. For current programs, this number will typically be relatively steady across the 5-year cycle. For startup programs, this number would increase each year up until Year 4 as new students enter. The FTE for startups will remain steady during Years 4 and 5.
Question 125, page 42, in reference to the payee information form, please define who is required to complete this form.
Your institution would only need to complete this form if it does not yet have a new NYS vendor ID or if you need to change information on this form.
Proposal guidelines, question 126. May a continuing program increase the number of FTEs for the new RFP?
Yes, up to the maximum.
Question 127. Does the original proposal, 2 copies and all the additional forms all get added to the USB drive and mailed in the same packet?
The USB drive must include 1 electronic copy of all paper material submitted, scanned originals, forms, and attachments. To avoid confusion, it is best to mail all materials in the same package.
Question 128. Why is the FTE calculation method so different from the original method, which is adding the number of all fall roster students plus the number of spring roster students and dividing the total by 2?
The new RFP FTE calculation is the same as in the most recent RFP.
Question 129. Do we have to use the forms provided for the verification of economic eligibility, educational eligibility, and sample checklists for students' financial aid file, or can we use our own version that we currently use?
These are samples. An IHE can decide to use these or their own forms.
Question 130. How many pages are required for Section E, page 47?
You can go up to 5 pages max, with 2 pages as a maximum per each goal, e.g., 2 pages plus 2 pages plus 1 page equals 5 pages.
Question 131, Section B. This section summarizes the proposal's purpose, scope, and outcomes. Are you referring to the proposal or the program?
The proposal describes your program. Ergo, the proposal must describe the program's purpose, scope, and outcomes.
Question 132, Section C. What do you mean by description of compliance with reporting requirements and student outcomes in the last HEOP cycle, or for similar opportunity programs, e.g. C-STEP, STEP, TRIO, or other similar campus-based programs supported by the IHE?
If your IHE is currently an HEOP grant recipient, you'll have to describe your compliance with HEOP reporting requirements and student outcomes in the last HEOP cycle. If your IHE is not a current HEOP grant recipient, you'll have to describe your compliance with the reporting requirements and student outcomes for similar opportunity programs, e.g. C-STEP, TRIO, or similar campus-based programs supported by the IHE.
Question 133, please clarify the expectations for sections for the need, D, and the recruitment and admissions, G sections. How is section D.2, description of the target population, page 47, different from the section G1B on page 48, which asks for a description of the specific characteristics of the pool of potential HEOP eligible students?
To avoid repetition in these 2 sections of your proposal, it is recommended that you describe the target population in one section and, if necessary, cross-reference that description in the other section. The difference should be in the focus of the narrative. We expect section D to focus on the educational needs that your program will meet in the communities to be served, while we expect section G to provide an in-depth summary of the AHE specific plans and process to recruit and admit eligible applicants.
Proposal rubric, question 134, on page 69, are we looking for the program services on campus for all underrepresented populations on campus, HEOP and traditionally admitted, section 1.c?
Yes.
Question 135, which format should we follow when responding to the RFP? The narrative outline presented in the RFP or the grading rubric provided at the end? As currently presented, they do not align. For example, the tutoring format presented in the narrative on pages 52 to 53 compared to the rubric for that section on page 73.
The narrative description and the rubric should correspond for each section. The narrative outlines the general guidelines used for programmatic purposes, while the rubric details the scoring process. Follow the rubric for scoring purposes.
Question 136, page 76. Rubric for extra credit section. Maximum loan limits proposal describes how the program will provide financial aid packages that keeps the annual loans less than the maximum allowed. Question, is this referring to loan packaging for the first year only or each year in college? Please clarify.
This asks for the IHE to state the annual loan limits that they commit for each year in college for the duration of the cycle.
Appendices, question 137. If we plan to enroll fewer than 20 HEOP eligible students, is a full or half-time HEOP counselor required for the summer program?
The IHE should staff their programs appropriately to ensure that the academic and counseling needs of the students are being met. There are recommendations for staffing in the RFP, particularly in Appendix 1, page 57. Note that SED recommends having a minimum of 30 FTEs annually in any program except for startup programs. These may start with less than 30 FTEs in the first year, but no less than 10 FTEs. A critical mass, quote unquote, is needed to ensure program success.
Question 138. If we plan to enroll fewer than 20 HEOP eligible students, please confirm that we are required to have a half-time HEOP counselor during the first academic year.
See question 137.
Question 139. Does the HEOP counselor requirements increase half-time to full-time as more students enter the pipeline in subsequent years, or is that requirement based on first-time HEOP students?
See question 137. This concludes the answers of SED to the questions posed by applicants or would-be applicants for the 2019-2024 HEOP RFP. Good luck to everyone.